We, as the women of the world, are angry, and we bear witness. We bear witness to homes that stifle our voices, streets that stop us in our tracks, and governments that sacrifice our bodies, companies that exploit our care. All over the world, the distinct flavor of patriarchy is evident in the rise of reactionary forces and authoritarian control. It feels like we're permanently in a state of struggle, fighting both to walk safely in public streets and to be heard in the public square. And so we bring an arsenal of weaponry: poetry, song, data, and organization, even as our thought is labeled salacious, seditious, and sacrilegious. If our thought is insurgent, our anger is our weapon. Hello and welcome to The Internationalist, a weekly show from the Progressive International. I'm Varsha Gandikota Nellutla from the PI Secretariat, bringing you a special episode on International Women's Day. I'm joined today by four incredible guests, and in today's show, we want to talk about our anger and exhaustion, pleasure and leisure, and we want to talk about our freedoms, the ones we have and the ones we dream of. My first guest is Tuba Syed, a feminist researcher, grassroots organizer associated with the socialist feminist organization, Women's Democratic Front in Pakistan. Welcome to the show, Tuba. And my next guest is Sabika Abbas Naqvi, a performance poet and founder of Sare Raguzar, Poetry on the Streets in India. Welcome, Sabika. And my third guest we have is Monica Meltis, feminist activist from Mexico City and executive director of Data Civica. Hi, Monica. And finally, joining us from Turkey is Melekondi, who is a representative of the We Will Stop Femicide platform in Turkey. Thank you all so much for being here today. I'm honored to be sharing this virtual stage with all of you on this International Women's Day. International Women's Day is personally special for me. My mother was a trade union leader here in Hyderabad in India. And for the longest time throughout my childhood, I thought her job was giving speeches because that's what I saw her do, especially on occasions such as Women's Day. But I remember reading one of her speeches and asking why she was talking about wages for sanitation workers and health insurance and pension plans. Surely they had nothing to do with women and Women's Day specifically. I recollect that story to say, as socialist feminists, our goal is not a world shared equally by ruling class men and women. It's not about equal opportunity domination. In the manifesto, Feminism for the 99%, the authors state this really clearly, right? We reject any so-called liberation that asks ordinary people in the name of feminism to be grateful that it's a woman, not a man, who busts their union, orders a drone to kill their parent, or locks their child in a cage at the border. What we want is truly a feminism that is for the 99%. So with that, I want to begin our conversation today by turning to Tuba. Tuba Syed is an organizer on the left. She's information secretary for the Socialist Party, Awami Workers Party in Punjab. She's also visiting faculty at the Gender Studies Department at Quaid-e-Azam University, Islamabad. Tuba, you are coming to us straight from the Islamabad Women's March this year, having organized the Aurat March, as it's called here. Now, we have some footage from the Women's Day March last year in 2020, where thousands of women marched across Pakistan's main urban centers to mark International Women's Day, rallying around the cry, Mera Jism, Meri Marzi, right, my body, my choice. So let's take a look at the clips from last year's Women's Day March. Those numbers, that energy is really incredible, but there was intense backlash, wasn't there? Well after the day, like death and rape threats afterwards, especially online. Tuba, I read somewhere that, you talked about how Twitter trolls call you comrade feminist, and I couldn't help but think, that's actually a great term, for someone like you want to embrace. But I know that the situation is serious. So tell us a little bit about how organizing for the march this year has been like, and the direction you see for the feminist movement, both in Pakistan but also the world over.
Um, Thank you very much, Varsha, for calling me and for having me with all the other panelists. I'm really honored, and I'm sorry about my voice. I've been screaming and sloganeering, so I'm not in the best of my health right now. Organizing the march. I mean, the march actually started in Pakistan, sort of like in 2018, and that's where you can say that there was sort of a resurgence of women's movement in the country, and that, I mean, for a very long time there was a women's movement, but it was not as active as we would like it to be, and it was almost unimaginable for even people like me who were constantly organizing that this could be possible in Pakistan. um, and for us, it's been easier for the first 2 years, I would say, because they didn't know what we were and what we were asking for. um, but when you showed the clips from last year, I was hoping that somehow you could show the clip of what happened to us in Islamabad, which is the capital of the country. So right where Islamabad march is the march in Pakistan. So it happens in different cities, but in the Islamabad march, we call ourselves socialist feminists. That the march itself calls says that it's the march of the socialist feminists coming together and organizing this march. So last year, when we were just about to march, a group of right wing was already present there. So there were many, like dozens of right wing political party members, as well as there some banned right wing organization members who had already been present there, and they also had women with them, and that is why also, like, it's important to mention that it was not just right wing men but also right wing women. And as soon as we were trying to leave and depart from the venue, they started throwing stones on us. They started throwing sticks on us. There were glass bottles. And the police could not control them. And we had warned the police and told them that there are threats against us. I mean, that is what happened last year. And after that, many of us were injured. They tried to block our way, not let us go. The march continued. The women stayed. We continued. We marched on. But what changed in all these years? I mean, this year was even more difficult for us. The government refused. We were the only city in the country which was refused an NOC. So we did not get official permission from the government, or you can say the district administration, to take out this march, because since what happened last year, you need permission so to ensure that there will be some form of security, because the right wing marches against the women's march. So it seems like that it keeps getting difficult every year for the women of this country. But at the same time, it's phenomenal how the women's movement has grown, and how it has evolved and changed. And couple of years ago, we could not imagine such a large mobilization in this number in Pakistan, especially with the rise of right wing and the authoritarian governments we've had in the past, and the kind of sham bourgeois democracy that we're living under. I mean, so for us as organizers and also as women of this country, this was something unbelievable. It still is. A part of me still is trying to process that this is happening here. So the movement has grown from just speaking to the legislation, which is something in the 80s, the Pakistani feminist movement was focusing a lot around legislation and law. But slowly, like this time, when we look at the march right now, or the women's movement right now, it has moved from the arena of we were only allowed in a way to talk about the public sphere, or how the law deals with the women. That was what was allowed. There was only space for that. But in this movement, what has happened is that women have brought their wounds to the city squares. Women actually come and talk about what we're told to never talk about. It's not allowed to talk about body politics, and the feminist movement for a very long time could not talk about body politics, the division of labor at home. So in this march, what actually ends up happening is women bear, they bring their wounds to the city squares and they just put them on show with their placards. And that is why it's become so controversial, because they're talking about very intimate, private details of their lives where they're exploited, the kinds of, the forms the oppression takes in their lives. And I mean, it's challenging patriarchy from where it really starts, and which is the family. It's challenging patriarchy, while at the same time the women are also understanding it much better than, I would say, the leftist movement, even, which is in the country. They're understanding it much better, how to form solidarities, work together. Now, there's solidarity with the left, the organizations are coming together, and it's growing. We see it growing every day. And personally, for me, I do think that uh, right now the movement is still in its very early stages. We're still still trying to sustain ourselves, because there's also there's not just opposition from the right wing, but also from the state. So there's a lot of pressure on us. There's also a lot of pressure from the society, because it's we're seditious for them. We're bad women who want to destroy not just the country, but also the home, the family, the culture. So yeah, I mean, right now we look at the movement, and I do think that with time it's actually becoming more and more inclusive, in the sense that because it's organized by different organizers, there's a lot of mutual learning happening, where one city picks something from the other city's organizers, and they're trying to work together, and it's becoming more and more cohesive every day, and it's becoming more and more radical every day. So yeah, that's where we are right now.
Thank you so much for that, Tuba. And more power to you and all of the comrades in the Aurat March and the Women's Democratic Front and all of the socialist feminists in Pakistan. When you were talking about not being given the no objection certificate in Pakistan, it reminded me of a conversation Sabika and I were just having backstage about not being given permission to do any marches or really big gatherings in India. India has been particularly quiet this International Women's Day precisely because of these permissions, and it's such a strange experience because across the subcontinent, protests have really been always a kind of festival, right? There's song and dance and anthems and new slogans that are being written and produced in that moment. So there's always been kind of a mixture of art and resistance that always went to that idea of protest. And so I want to turn to you now, Sabika. Sabika, you're a poet whose work revolves around progressive rights, primarily gender and minority rights. And for our audience, she's co-edited a graphic anthology comprising of work of South Asian queer, women, and non-binary artists, the Bystander Anthology, which has recently been released. I actually just got my copy a few days ago in the mail. It has a beautiful, beautiful cover. But so, Sabika, here in our country, we saw an unprecedented movement in Shaheen Bagh. Women organized and occupied public space to protest the Citizenship Amendment Act that was clearly aimed at disenfranchising Muslims in India. And in so many ways, it felt like a manual for revolution, right? In some ways, similar to what we're seeing with the farmers' protest today, with education, poetry, dance taking center stage. When talking about political expression. Let's actually take a look at some of the footage from the Shaheen Bagh protests a year ago in India.
दरिया तो भर गई मैं अब सैलाब हूँ नजर घुमा मैं हर शहर का शाहीबा हूँ दबा सके ना सौ तूफान मैं वो परवाज हूँ तू आके देख औरत हूँ और इनकलाब हूँ
ये सरकार सिर्फ 3 चीजों से डरती है पढ़ा लिखा दलित पढ़ा लिखा मुसलमान और पढ़ी लिखी आवाज उठाने वाली औरत
Those are great shots, right? Both of the protests and that dialogue. And Sabika, in this volume, I'm actually just looking at your book. You have this line: "We tried poems, protests, placards, music, education, stand-up comedy, and calm discussions. But the only language you understood was that of the burning bus." So tell us a little bit about this. You've always occupied this space as a writer and an activist. Tell us a bit about what it means to be someone trying to fight the kind of sophisticated architecture of repression of the Indian state with poetry on the streets.
So basically, before I thank you so much for making me part of this panel with these amazing, amazing feminists from across the world. I want to begin today's International Working Women's Day, and I want to begin by uh, paying my respect and showing my love to the women who came before me and who ensured that I have the capacity to speak and talk right now. I want to begin by thank you for reading that poem, Varsha, from my book, from our book, basically. The point is that every time the current state, as a Muslim woman in India, we continuously deal with this idea a lot. Like the current state, the government, the men from the majority community, the people around us, everyone wants to be messiahs of Muslim women. Like everyone wants to come be the knight in shining armor on the white horse and wants to save Muslim women. There always conversation about, oh, the poor Muslim woman is being oppressed, and they all want to save us, whether it's a Kashmiri woman who has to be saved, or like a North Indian Muslim woman who has to be saved, or like a Muslim worker who has to be woman worker who has to be saved. So the whole conversation revolves around it all the time. We want Muslim women to do this, we want Muslim women to do that, but at the end of the day, the government is the state, as well as the current ideology and the fascist state, is supremely scared of Muslim women, and even more scared of articulate Muslim women who occupied streets for days and days, because see the for days and days to ask for their rights and to ask for not, and these women were like the women of my family, our community, the women sitting out on the streets were like, flag bearers of questioning fascism, of questioning the radicalization that is happening in the country. And it didn't happen overnight. It didn't happen like one fine day when the CAA and RC came, the Muslim women decided, no, 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 we're going to occupy the streets. It has been a process. It has been a process of pushing the entire community against the wall. And this time, they forgot that we, the women over here right now in 2019-20, were not the women whom they have forgotten to write about in history. Like they've forgotten to mention Fatima B in history, like they've forgotten to mention Begum Akhtar, or they've forgotten to mention Atto Bajia, like they've forgotten to mention all the Muslim women who have ensured the building of this country, this community, who have fought for workers' rights and farmers' rights. They forgot that we at this moment are writers. Women are writers, women are poets, women are activists, women are in a position of power. They're going to articulate, they're going to stand up, and if time requires, if the situation requires, we are going to sit on cold nights throughout the night, singing and dancing, just asking the prime minister of the country to come and meet us, to listen to what we are going to say. And our women are going to be known world over for the kind of resistance that they've shown. And not just women of one city, one kasbah, one district, but Muslim women primarily across the country were out there on the streets, singing songs, writing poems, and standing up and using humor, basically. And there's a part of my poem that I will read out and also like translate, which basically the first line is Mera desh jal raha hai, like my country is burning, my country is burning. And there is the first part of the poem is about how my country is burning, what are the issues that the country is facing. And the last line and the last part, which is dedicated to all these women with whom we sat together night after night, protesting and questioning the current state of affairs. It goes like this: मगर जलते मुल्क में लगी आग को बुझाने आ गई हैं सड़क पर, उंगली उठाती, नारे लगाती, उम्मीद जगाती, गाने गाती औरतें, सर को ढके या बाल खोले, परचम लेकर शोर मचाती, बैरिकेड्स गिराती, मर्दानी सियासत को मुंह चढ़ाती, हम औरतों से खबरदार, सुन लो पुकार अब खबरदार, नया सवेरा होगा जरूर, अब बदलेगा जुल्मी दस्तूर, सड़क पे देखो आए हैं अब तूफान लोग, आफ्ताब लोग, बेबाक लोग, लाजवाब लोग. So it basically talks about how our country is burning, but to save our country, our community, our society, women have finally come on the streets with their fingers raised, with flags in their hands, singing songs and reciting poems. Whether their heads are covered or their hair is open, it doesn't matter. They're out on the streets, shouting, talking, and actually making faces at the patriarchal, communal, fascist government and system that is in place. So everyone should be beware, because these women are dreamers. These women are not just resisting, these women are also creating an alternative. They're also giving us hope and dreams of a new future, where communalism will end, where fascism will end, where Muslim women will not just be seen as Muslim women, but will also be seen as working women, will also be seen as women who are farmers, will also be seen as, because right now, even during the Kisan March, when a lot of Kisan union, the farmers unions had come and shown support to us, all this while had come and shown support to us. But right now, Muslim women are considered to be a unique entity, and the intersectionality of them as workers, as farmers, as garment factory laborers, as home house helps, house domestic workers, all of these categories are not seen as an identity. The identity of a Muslim woman is out there as only as a Muslim woman. I started performing on the streets because I wanted to subvert the public spaces, because public spaces are meant to be for upper caste, heterosexual, able-bodied, cis men of the majority community, never for us. So the Muslim woman's body is always seen as a fetish when they are in minority. Like the body of a minority woman from a minority community is always seen as a space of crime, control, and it is very well evident in the kind of things that were said about women of Shaheen Bagh, the women out on the streets, the kind of threats that we get, that I get, all the other young Muslim women get when they speak out, whether it is on social media or otherwise. But we are here, and we are here to stay. We are here to articulate. We are here to write. And on International Women's Day, everyone knows that we dream of bringing the communal fascist state down, because we know they're scared of us. They're scared of how nonviolent we are. They're scared of how articulate we are. And they are goddamn scared of how creative and innovative we are. Thank you.
Thank you for that incredible speech, Sabika. I really love that note of saying, if you are scared of Muslim women, then yes, beware of us. Of course, Berta Casares, the incredible indigenous rights activist from Honduras comes to mind, who we mourned only a few days ago because of her assassination. They're afraid of us because we are not afraid of them. I wanna turn to you, Monica. As activists on the left, I think we're always in search of these kind of critical openings in history for the winds, to shift towards socialism. But there's so many incredible activists experimenting with the nuts and bolts of democracy, and really through that, sort of slowly moving the needle towards the left. And, again, Rosa Luxemburg, right, whose birthday we celebrated again a few days ago, said democracy is indispensable, not because it renders superfluous the conquest of political power by the proletariat, but on the contrary, because it makes the seizure of power both necessary and possible. And you've been straddling these kind of two worlds of making institutions move, bend, and really work for the feminist cause while being firmly grounded in activism. And I know that you're sitting in this cafe now, having just stuck posters and art across the city, and I want to hear a little bit more about that as well. But I also want to ask, especially over the last few years, with the rise of Ni Una Menos, not One Less Woman, there's been a surge of attention to the killings of women both in Mexico as well as the region. I want to bring a few clips from some of these protests for our audience today. Let's take a look at some of these. That's incredible footage, right? And while movements like these provide hope on the one hand, there's also a sobering reality. Violence against women has actually gone up since the pandemic began, especially in Mexico as well. The number of murders has gone up, and the government responded last summer by actually slashing the budget of agencies that could address some of these issues. And in this way, right, neoliberal policy kind of fractures society and fragments the political field, which makes it difficult often, I think, for those of us in this job to build a certain kind of unified resistance. So, Monica, I want to hear from you. As socialist feminists, how do we work with governments and institutions that in this form, through neglect, allow women to be murdered? But at the same time, how do we react to this kind of unified resistance that is truly emerging, both in the region that you're in, but also the rest of the world?
Thank you, Barsha, and everyone for inviting me to this incredible panel. And also for raising these questions, because I think that as my other colleagues here have said, the reality is that the feminist movement, it is growing a lot. As you can see in the footage that you shared before, last year we had an incredible, amazing response on the march of in Mexico City and all over the country. So we are a movement that the movement is growing, but it's also at the same time that it is growing. The very liberal part of the feminist movement is growing a lot, and I think that this is, of course, it's good news that the movement is growing like this, particularly in a country like Mexico, as you were saying, where we have very, very important violence issues, particularly regarding enforced disappearances. In Mexico, we have by now 80,000 people disappeared. And also we have a context not only where enforced disappearances are being going on for ever since a lot of years now, but particularly after the president Felipe Calderón declared the war on drug in 2008. We are in a country that's basically living a war. Just to give you an example, from 2008 to up to date, we have around 250,000 people being killed. So we are in a context when there is a lot of violence. At the same time, we have the movement that is growing a lot, but we are. I would say that we're following the neoliberal and capitalist ways of not questioning a lot of the things that are going on. So we think that the feminist movement should just talk about the violence that women are living, but a very, very specific type of violence that is the typically associated to femicide violence, or the violence that is usually going on inside the houses, and not the violence that is affecting a lot of people, not only women, of course, but also men, and particularly young women and men. So we are not questioning the ways the war are affecting women. I would say that we're not questioning that enough. And we are, it appears that sometimes the feminist movement talks about this type of violence, but just this type of violence, So we are not thinking that the militarization of the country is also, or should be also, a feminist concern, Because the militarization in the country that's been going on for 10 years, or more than 10 years now, it is also affecting violence inside the house. And a lot of, not only the militarization, but also the government rhetoric right now, as you were saying, is on the one hand, like the movement is very, very important right now, but the government is not following anything of the movement, any hints and any of the issues we are demanding. It appears that the president has a particular fight or battle against women, because in Mexico the government goes every morning. There's a morning call, every morning, every day, which is basically the government. The president comes out of the palace and just talks for like a couple of hours, and it does a lot of it affects a lot the way the agenda is set, in the communication and the media. Um, After the government goes out every morning, the president goes out every morning to talk about whatever he wants. So there has been a lot of reactions from the president, counter, like battling with the narrative that the feminist movement is putting out there. No, so for example, just to say that today is right now is in the morning in Mexico City, and it's been we're doing a lot of preparation for the march. Of course, it's not going to be as big and impressive as last year because of the pandemic, but just in preparation of the march, the government basically fenced all of the city hall downtown, and they are putting fences in the streets, to protect the buildings, and they are putting a lot of polices out there. I would say that bueno, they announced that 2,000 police women will be like protecting the streets. And just yesterday, there was an attempt of taking 13 women out of their houses because they were apparently, bueno, they were preparing a performance, but the policemen entered and they basically said that they were doing Molotov bombs for the marches. No, so there is a lot of context. We also have a context of repression in Mexico City, particularly right now, but also in the country, all along the country. We have a very militarized state right now, and I would say that the feminist movement sometimes is not questioning these ways of generating, of generating security. No? Security, because of course the militarization of the country is not doing any favor on diminishing the violence that women live, or is doing quite the opposite. No, so I would say that we should start questioning a lot the militarization of the country, but also, for example, now the violence against women, and particularly homicides, are being created by gunfires. No? So gunfires are right now the first cause of death, for homicides in Mexico. And we are not also, I would say that we're not questioning enough the politics on arms, and gunfire in Mexico, and also the militarization, from a feminist way, no? From a feminist view, understanding that this type of violence affects women in very different ways, but it does has an effect on how we live our lives, and in the way we are trying to move along in this country. No? So yes, I would say that the movement has grown a lot, and we are doing a lot of demands, but we are not doing enough, I would say, for other types of violence that are not thought as very that are not thought as violence against women. No, so we have a very reduced way of understanding violence against women, I would say, and I think that it's about time that we start questioning more how these other types of violence does affect the life of women and children. No?
Thank you for that, Monica. And absolutely, I think this has been the rallying cry for feminist, especially feminist internationalists for decades now, right? That we need to be anti-war, we need to be against imperialism of all sorts. And if you think about if you think about war and women as a weapon of war, you see that theme kind of continuing through the different authoritarian nationalists of today who attempt to use women and our bodies as conduits for the production of a certain kind of national identity. And on the Polish abortion protests that happened just a few months ago and have been violently crushed, very much the response to that was that the protests aim to destroy Poland, that they aim to destroy the church and the history of the Polish nation, really. And so in this form, the kind of linkage between women's bodies, especially our reproductive capacities, to kind of these national honor, national identity conversations have always been in the discourse, have always been part of the arsenal of seizing political power, especially from the right. I want to turn to you, Melik, because this resonates with me here in my own country, India, but Turkey too has become a certain kind of reactionary center of the world in recent years. But I saw this video of women Turkish lawmakers staging a protest in the General Assembly, singing the viral Chilean feminist anthem, "The Rapist Is You," to highlight the crisis of femicide in the country, that I thought was so incredible. Because here, in my own context, for example, we're struggling still to get a women's reservation bill in the parliament and ensure that at least we're in the assembly in the first place in order to be able to do such things. I want to show that footage to our audience today before I turn to you with a question. That's really incredible. The video cut off, but I remember watching this when it first came out, and it actually pans to a bunch of clueless, some of the male ministers just sitting there wondering what's happening in the assembly, which is almost equally fun to watch. But I want to ask you, Melik, in this context of severe political repression, right? I want to hear from you on how you've seen the International Women's Day and Women's March change over the decades in the way that it's existed, but also that acknowledging that organizing still needs to happen beyond these specific moments, beyond specific events around International Women's Day. And how has that landscape changed over the decades, especially with your platform, as you've been dealing with the question of real increase in femicides?
These videos from the assembly, and also we're trying to make a protest with Lastasis, which scream from the Chile, and also the police also trying to block our protest, and also they are trying to judge our friends because of these lyrics. And also as you say that in Turkey the femicide numbers is very high, so by thinking of that, the femicides are one of the most important problem in our society, like other countries. And also, of course, I am very happy to hear that the violence against women is increasing, femicide number is increasing in most of the countries. But on the other side, the movements against violence, movements against femicide also growing up all over the countries, not only in Turkey, but also we hear from the other fronts. So it will be giving us a hope to ending this kind of a violence and femicide issues in all around the world. And also, but we were established to put an end to femicide issue in Turkey, and also our name also We Will Stop Femicide platform. We named our organization after our goal, and also we have been fighting for years to end femicide. So on 5th March we meet as We Will Stop Femicide platform, Women's Assembly, saying that we will not leave femicide suspicious, because on the other side we're now starting to see the femicide is the issue, is a kind of a trying to keeping suspicious, and also keeping trying to keeping this femicide as an accident or is something like a suicide. So on the 5th March, our protest was hundreds of women joining our protest, and also, but on the other hand, hundreds of police stood against the student. And also, the police did not allow our banners written that something like LGBTQ on them to square. So we are seeing that they are trying to trying to stopping the women's effort, but we are knowing that our movement is becoming much more crowded, so it's not very easy to stopping the women's struggle, women's movement in Turkey too. We are since 2010 we have been reporting femicide mostly by keeping the track of newspapers and the news we could reach. We released the information on the number of femicide victims, the perpetrators, the excuse of femicide, the location and time of the femicide to the public. The Minister of Interior has begun to declare the femicide data by using the term of femicide in the only last 2 years with our women's our efforts. So we carry out a holistic struggle in Turkey, from data reporting to following up violence against women and femicide cases with our lawyers, and from creating public opinion to mass protests, from constructive suggestion to open holiday for women subject to violence who want to receive information about their rights. So according to our data, 300 women were murdered, were killed by men, and 171 women died under suspicious circumstances. So it's a very huge number, and murdered women have two things in common. Being women and wanting to make decisions about their own lives. So most of the women were killed by the man close to them, their father, the man they were married to, the man they divorced, the man they were dating, they broke up, or their brothers or their relatives. More than half done of the killed women were killed in their houses, which must be very safe for us. But in this case, in this sense, our data is very similar to the data the other countries of the world. And what is the most significant is that the pandemic period, the number of femicides that occur in women's own houses perpetrated by men close to them has increased. So we are seeing that the number of increasing in femicide, but only there is a 1 year the decreasing number of the femicide in Turkey. It is the 2011. And it is a very important point for the Turkish woman, and also maybe you heard the European woman also be part of the Istanbul Convention. Turkey was the first signatory country of the Istanbul Convention, and all political party leaders declared that there's a zero tolerance towards the violence against women, and Turkey signed the convention, a concrete declaration of political will against violence against women. And at that time, we were working on a law that would protect women in accordance with the convention. And also with a protection law and the Istanbul Convention, we are knowing that it will vary if we implement these convention and the protection law. We know that the femicide number in Turkey will be very lowered. So not only in the femicide issues, but also the quantitative increase, also other dimensions of violence occurred in Turkey. So now women are now being tortured to death by men, being killed in front of their children, and some are murdered together with their children. The perpetrators try to obscure the evidence by trying to make the murders look like suspicious death. The number of suspicious deaths have increased, and also we encounter the murders may seem like a suicide. We see women's death who are trying to be made suspicious, and declare it as accidents and practical jokes. And now we are trying to stop femicide. We are trying to reveal the facts lying under the suspicious woman. For instance, today we learned that the perpetrator, one of our parents, Merve, who killed by a man, and the perpetrator could hide the murder and hide Merve's body for 4 months, and by sending her body by cargo. And also, it is inevitable to see how relaxed men are in our country, and they think they can kill women, hide it, and also get away with it without any punishment. So, also, we are knowing that the reason why the perpetrators think that they can hide and the murder is the lack of the effective investigation, and the Istanbul Convention is not being implemented effectively. But as other friends mentioned, women are changing in Turkey too. And in Turkey, women are changing. They are demanding justice. Contrary to popular belief, femicide is not seen more in underdeveloped regions, but in metropolis. Regardless of the circumstances, women are changing in the deep course of history. Urbanization is increasing. Society is making progress. There is television in every home. There are more ways of communication, and the women benefit from all the ports and highways that have been constructed are being bragged about now. So we women became aware of the things that are happening in the world. Therefore, we are changing. And also we ask, why is my life not changing when the world is? And also we see that everyday women trying to make their voice heard on social media, if they are subjected to violence, if you are not happy, if you want to divorce, get work, get education, dress as they want. And in other words, we want to live with dignity and make decisions for ourselves. So consequently, we are trying to suppress with instruments of patriarchy and male violence they are against in this progress. But we are seeing that the government also trying to opening discussions about the Istanbul Convention protection law. But we are demanding that the effective implementation of the Istanbul Convention and the protection law will put an end to the femicides during protests. But we are know that, and we believe that with our fight, we will implement both the Istanbul Convention and the protection law. So we are knowing that with our movements, not only in Turkey, but in the other countries all around the world, we will gain the equality and the freedom with women's movement.
Thank you for that, Malik. I'm a bit at a loss for words, because every time I'm in one of these panels, I'm reminded once again of why these struggles for many, many women around the world aren't just about improving their lives by, asking for access and rights to this and that, but really are existential threats, and existential threats that are compounded by a new layer now of, political fear, surveillance, and repression. So more power to you and to your platform for fighting femicides in Turkey, but also sending a message with your assistance to the rest of us. Now, as I talk about this, this question keeps coming up for me, and I want to bring it to the panel today. In such a context of increased violence and repression, fear and confrontation, how do we, as feminists, as socialist feminists, find spaces in the struggle for pleasure and leisure? Right? We've talked a lot about our weaponry, but in today's both a day of commemoration, we've, of course, even in the comments, I'm seeing people mourning all of the feminist activists that came before us who laid down their lives for this struggle. It's both a day of commemoration, but also a day of joy, as we're reminded of the communities that we're born into and the communities that we join. I want to hear how, these connect for you in your struggles. Maybe Sabika, I want to start with you, because we've talked earlier about how it feels like one of the things that the Modi government in India today has, stolen from a lot of us is really the luxury to be creative, right? Because we feel like we're responding to an emergency every single day, and are just drowning in these knee-jerk reactions in order to just hold on to any ground at all and not seize it a little bit more to the right. So I want to hear from you, and then maybe I'll turn to the rest of the panel on on this certain kind of theft of luxury to be creative, and a theft of imagination that seems to have occurred in a lot of our countries today?
So, thank you for this question. It's an amazing question, something that I've been working on since the past 2 years or so. There are times when I write poems about how. I remember during the Shaheen Bagh protest, I wrote a poem called "I Can't Be a Lover Right Now," and it basically talks about that how I cannot replace the cold winter nights of our movement with the warmth of my lover's embrace. That how petitions take more blood than love letters, and how this is not the right time to mourn the departure of a lover, but the time to grieve the taking away of our rights. And so I oscillate always between that kind of a space where I'm like, okay, no more we are always out there on the streets protesting, writing all the time, producing content, poetry, songs, just to fight the state. But I do realize that in between all of these things, there's a lot of love and laughter. There's a lot of reading and sharing that happens all the time. Like so many days and nights when we were on the streets, our nights were spent watching movies, singing to each other, playing antakshari, etc. I mean, it pains my heart to see that the right to gossip has been taken away from us, like from the entire community. Whenever our cousins we meet together, there's no longer gossip, there's no longer conversation about, oh, this one's doing that, that one's doing that. The whole conversation revolves around, oh, how to leave the country, or how to have enough money, to secure enough money for our bail bonds. But amidst this, we end up celebrating birthdays. We do end up, buying flowers for each other once in a while. We do end up, making clothes, whatever, like something that gives us pleasure, going out on a picnic one day, only because that is what they don't want us to do. This is exactly what they don't want us to do. They don't want us to go on holidays because hotels no longer allow Muslims into their premises. They no longer want us to marry, or the whole debate around marriage as the idea is one thing, but they don't want us to marry because they are scared that a woman will become impure if they marry outside the caste or their religion. They don't want us to do anything, basically, even celebrate International Women's Day. And that's what we will stand up against. They don't want us to do it, and we will do it. We will, during our andolans and movement, we will take out time to celebrate birthdays and sleep. And I always say that this burden to fight on us should not be there every day, especially if we are a marginalized community. It should not be a burden on us every day. अगर हम सड़क पे आ जाएं तो अच्छा. If we are out on the streets protesting, shouting, saying out slogans, तो अच्छा, very good. अगर हम घर में किसी रोज सो जाएं तो अच्छा. And if one day we take out and sleep, that's also fine, because honestly, we are the ones at the receiving end of this. It is our ihsan. It is a favor that we are doing to the country by coming out on the streets and ensuring that the state of affair doesn't change. The imagined fabric of equality and love and harmony doesn't go. So we do take out time. We do take out time for ishq and mushq, as I say.
Thanks for that, Savika. I want to turn to Monica.
Yes, I think that we also have found a lot of pleasure and joy on the act of resisting. But for example, just today we were like we gathered a couple of friends and friends of other friends just to do an action on painting in the floor a message that says we are alive, we are free, and we are together, no? Because just the act of getting together and gathering and writing a message that is important for us, that is in a creative way and in a very joyful way as well. We are able to find time for pleasure and being creative together, you know. We also I wanted to share, but I can put it in Twitter right now. As I was saying at the beginning, today in the march, a few days ago, the government fenced all of the downtown buildings, and one of the buildings are that were fenced, like very very intensively fenced. Um, is the government building in Mexico City, and in response of the fencing of the building, women went together to do a sort of like a memory act, in where they wrote in very very big letters in the fences, Mexico is a femicide country, and in the fences they wrote all of the names of the women that have been murdered. So these types of things also, even though they are being done in a very violent context, and like just as my colleagues were saying, like before, we are putting our wounds out there, no? So we are in pain, and we are very very discouraged by the government responses, but also by our own pains. But at the same time, walking together and resisting together are things that can be very very pleasurable, and can be very joyful, and can be very powerful. And I think that those things are not going to go away anymore.
Thank you for that, Monica, and thank you, Sabika, Melik, and Tuba, for raising all of the critical questions that the feminist movement has to contend with today. As I think about the history of International Women's Day, I think of Russia on the eve of World War I, when women observed their first International Women's Day, which was actually on February 23rd, but became March 8th in the Gregorian calendar, because we still are constrained by certain hegemonic ideas. With a strike for bread and peace. And that was the first International Women's Day, really to protest the death of over 2 million Russian soldiers. And this idea has always been fascinating to me, the idea of women's strike, right? As with any strikes, of course, a withdrawal of labor immediately illuminates in one fell swoop who really keeps the machinery running, who keeps the economy running, who keeps every single household or family running, as it is with the wage workers for the factory, or as we see the strikes with, say, gig workers in public transport today. I think the women's strike really illuminates in extremely clear fashion whose unpaid work really sustains the world today. The economy and the world would certainly fall apart if we didn't continue to assume that women do housework for love, and that women do all of this work, to keep the world running. So it's this kind of restlessness. I know we started with questions of anger, we started with questions of exhaustion, and we talked through some very tough themes to end with the idea of love and idea of hope. And I think I want to end on that note with a quote from the Feminism for the 99%, that it's a restless anti-capitalist feminism that we all want. One that can never be satisfied with equivalences until we have equality, never satisfied with legal rights until we have justice, and never satisfied with democracy until individual freedom is calibrated on the basis of freedom for all. On that note, happy International Women's Day to our panelists, to everyone that's watching, and thank you so much for everything that you do. And in solidarity, I'm going to sign off. Thank you.